Welcome everyone, and we're hoping now we've got the technical difficulties figured out. I had this really nice speech that I've now read twice, and due to time, I'm going to skip through a few parts, but want to welcome you all to International Women's Day. My name is Donovan Nielsen. I'm the president of Scovan Engineering. It's hard to believe that it's already been 1 full year since we were here a year ago, and what a year it's been. I clearly remember this event being the start of COVID-19 last year, not necessarily that it originated here, but our awareness of it really started to ramp up during the week of Women's Day last year. And it's been a year of uncertainty, a year of change, challenges, yet with that came some incredible displays of humanity and community. And we are honored to have you join us today, even if it is virtual. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the stories of a number of exceptional women that you're going to hear today. So this event is us being intentional about choosing to challenge. Our goal for the afternoon is to celebrate women's achievements, raise awareness about women's equality in Calgary and beyond, to lobby for accelerated gender parity, and to fundraise for local females, or a local female-focused charity. Join us today as we celebrate some of the truly exceptional women in our city and hear their stories about challenge and resilience. We may not be able to change our social biases overnight, but we'll do our part to continue to raise awareness and to choose to accelerate gender parity. And we'll do all of this while having some fun. Thank you to everyone that contributed to this event. An event like this does not just happen. Behind the scenes are hours of planning, organizing, coordinating, and setup. A special thank you to Valerie Stewart and her team for organizing yet another great event. And today would not be possible without the support of those in our community. This is a not-for-profit event with all proceeds going to our female-focused charity, Canada Bridges. And we're going to hear more about our sponsors throughout today's event, but I want to quickly acknowledge them here as well. This includes our gold sponsors, Suncor, PTW Energy Services, and Colliers. Our silver sponsors, ICM Capital Management, Mergen Law, Drifter Projects, and Spartan Controls. And our bronze sponsors, Maxfield, AES, RailServe, Hive Innovations, Gemini Fabrication, Calgary Women in Energy, Gas Processing Association of Canada, and Starbelly Open Kitchen and Lounge. And thank you again for all joining us today. We genuinely wish that all of you could be here in person. It would make this a little bit easier, and we probably wouldn't have the same technical difficulties, but this too shall pass, and we will celebrate together in the near future. And finally, a special thank you to our speakers today, Gayathri Shukla, Shanna Boyd, and Andrea Decor. The ladies are exceptional, and it's possible that they were able just to show up here and tell us their stories, but my guess is there was some time and effort putting into preparing for today. We are honored to have you, and we look forward to hearing from you. How will you help forge a gender-equal world? Celebrate women's achievement, raise awareness against bias, and take action against equality. Thank you.
Thank you, Donovan. I'd like to get confirmation that people can hear me, but I'll have to get a visual, getting a thumbs up. Okay, great, my mic is on. Woo, well, thank you everyone for joining us today, and apologize for the delay, but whoever thought that a actual live event with audience would be easier. So we miss you. I really miss seeing all of your lovely faces here, and so thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to join us. I really want to thank to all the men and women joining us today virtually through live stream to celebrate International Women's Day. It does take a team to organize an event like this, and so thank you to the organizing committee who helped pull this all together for us. Thank you to our sponsors for making this a corporate priority. And of course, thank you to these three amazing women here today. I'm just so honored to have you here, Gayathri, Shanna, and Andrea, for stepping up and sharing your stories with us today. I'm also so fortunate to work with a company as progressive as Scovan Engineering, who truly believes in equality, diversity, and inclusion enough to champion this terrific event for a third year in a row. So before we begin, I'd like to provide an Indigenous acknowledgement. In the spirit of respect, reciprocity, and truth, we honor and acknowledge the traditional Treaty 7 territory and oral practices of the Blackfoot Confederacy Nations. We acknowledge that this territory is home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region 3 within the historical Northwest Métis homeland. Finally, we acknowledge all nations, Indigenous and non, who live, work, and play and help us steward this land, honor, and celebrate this territory. So we're pleased to align again this year with the nonprofit organization Canada Bridges. Excuse me. Canada Bridges Social Development. So thank you to Alyssa Lindsay, Executive Director of Bridges Social Development, for the summary that she's provided me for the organization. At Canada Bridges, we believe that youth have the wisest perspectives, deepest insights, and greatest potential to create a stronger, more diverse, and healthier society for everyone. We have engaged with thousands of young people between the ages of 16 to 30 from across Alberta for the past 6 years, and we've worked with the invitation alongside our neighbors from the Siksika and Stoney Nakoda nations, as well as in Calgary. Each year, we have interact and support over 200 youth as they explore the change they want to create in the world and take the first steps to creating that change. In the words of one young woman, if I hadn't known about Canada Bridges, I wouldn't be as ambitious and courageous today. They encourage and motivate us and are with us throughout the way. So Canada Bridges is honored to be a part of today's International Women's Day celebration and thankful for all the partners joining us in celebrating and creating a world where all youth can show up, stand up, and be heard. What a fantastic organization, and I know it's one that's making a real impact in the communities that they serve. So I have to tell you, we wasn't sure if we were going to be here today hosting this event. It's been an incredibly difficult year for so many reasons. We've lost loved ones, and ones we love have lost their jobs. Our families and peers have carried the weight of the pandemic on their shoulders, and the burden has taken its toll. Over the last year, we found ourselves in a virtual world where we've never been so connected through technology and communication tools. Yet we've never felt more disconnected to our communities and our ecosystem and the world we live in. And that's why we felt that it was more important than ever to continue on with this event this year. So we're here to connect with each and every one of you and to share our personal experiences and hopefully some positivity and encouragement for greater things to come. So there's no doubt that 2020 has been a challenging year, but yet in many ways it's been a breakthrough year for women. For the first time, a woman was named Vice President of the United States. Kamala Harris has made several firsts. She became the first African American, first Asian, and first woman Vice President of the United States of America. And while recognizing her responsibility, but also the change that she was making in history, Ms. Harris so aptly said during her victory speech, "While I may be the first woman in this office, I will not be the last." So while we celebrate this meaningful accomplishment in America, other parts of the world, women have been serving as elected or appointed heads of state for years. Globally, there have actually been 29 female state leaders in 2019. And throughout the pandemic, some of the most successful leaders in dealing with COVID-19 crisis have been women and leaders of those states with women leaders. In fact, one study found that outcomes related to COVID-19 included number of cases and fatalities were systematically better in countries led by women. The Harvard Business Review quoted that women have proven themselves better leaders during a crisis. And all of this while still getting paid less than their male counterparts. And here in Alberta, Dr. Dean Hinshaw has won over fans for her calm and competent handling of the pandemic that has killed more than 2 million people worldwide. Yet, as we celebrate International Women's Day 2021, the World Economic Forum is projecting that it'll take close to 100 years to close the overall global gender gap. Women are suffering disproportionately from the pandemic, from being on the front lines to increased domestic violence, job loss, and other impacts. If we've learned one thing this year, it's how important resilience is during times of challenge. Sometimes it takes grit and determination, and other times just an encouraging word from someone you love or respect. Choose to Challenge is a theme for International Women's Day, and our speakers will be sharing their personal journeys of where they have demonstrated resilience to overcome challenge in their lives. There are so many examples of women who have overcome challenge to achieve some incredible things, and I believe that each and every one of these women need to be celebrated for their courageousness to carry forward and lead with impact and grace. One of these women I want to talk about today is Whitney Wolfe Herd. Whitney Wolfe Herd is the co-founder and CEO of Bumble Inc., which operates 2 online dating apps, Bumble and Badoo. Wolfe Herd first founded Bumble, the dating app on which women make the first move, with Russian billionaire Andrea in 2014, at the young age of 22. Wolfe Herd was named one of Business Insider's 30 most influential women under 30 in tech in 2014. She was named Forbes' 30 under 30 in 2017 and 2018. And in 2021, Herd became the world's youngest female self-made billionaire after taking Bumble public. She also became the youngest woman to take a company public at the age of 31. Together, Bumble and Badoo operate in 150 countries with 42 million monthly active users, and growing. So that sounds impressive. But what you don't hear in this story is the struggle and challenges she faced to get to this point. In fact, in 2012, Wolfe Herd co-founded a dating app called Tinder. Wolfe Herd became vice president of marketing for Tinder. She was reportedly behind the name of the app, and she also was credited with fueling its popularity on college campuses and growing its user base. Wolfe Herd left the company in 2014 due to growing tensions with other company executives. After leaving the company, she filed a lawsuit against Tinder for sexual harassment. The parties eventually settled. On February 11th, 2021, just 1 month ago, when the youngest woman to ever take a company public and ring the bell on Wall Street, while holding her 1-year-old son, no less, became the youngest self-made billionaire, she wrote this on Instagram. To anyone going through a setback, a low point, or a rough patch, to anyone who feels disempowered in their relationships, or who's had the courage to make the first move into healthier ones, today is for you. This is the outcome of starting over again when it feels like the end. It's a testament to new beginnings, new paradigms, and new norms. Today has shown that barriers can be broken when we believe in a better way. Bumble is the outcome of a fiercely dedicated team who've worked tremendously hard to show that women can, should, and will make the first move. When relationships are better for women, they're better for everyone. To all first movers, whether on our platforms in business or in life, you're what today is about. Never take no for an answer, believe in yourselves, and turn your pain into purpose. Most importantly, treat people with kindness and dream big. Success is not an easy road for anyone. I like this story for so many reasons. I'm personally passionate about female investors and entrepreneurs. I believe women's economic empowerment is the key to unlocking gender equality. This includes participating equally in markets, acting as directors on boards, as venture capitalists, and business leaders, and economic decision makers. Now, if this strikes a chord with you, you should check out The 51 and Direct Her Network, both fabulous organizations that I think are doing great things. This story also demonstrates how young women can make a difference and how we can overcome challenge and do some amazing things. As incredibly inspiring as the story is, though, Whitney didn't just get to ring that bell on her own. It took generations of women before her and some pretty influential connections too to make it all happen. Change is a funny thing. It takes place slowly and incrementally when we're not even looking. It happens every time a woman raises her hand, leads a group, challenges the norm, asks why, and rises to the occasion. When we challenge, we make someone take pause, become more aware, and more alert of the underlying biases that rule our perceptions in the world. That's why I believe it's so important that we lead by example. We need to be the example for the next generation. Change is necessary for progress. Be that through innovation, new technology, or a diverse perspective, we need to change the status quo to do our part. We need to challenge in honor of those women who have broken the barriers before us. And for all those young girls who are watching us and are saying, I want to do that. So that's why we're here today. Much like our First Nation ancestors, we believe in the power of storytelling and learning from our past experiences. I'm so honored to announce our keynote speakers today, Gayathri Shukla, Shanna Boyd, and Andrea Decor. Thank you for being here and agreeing to share your personal stories with us. Our agenda is as follows. Each speaker will present for 20 minutes, and at approximately, in an hour from now, we'll have an interactive panel discussion for another 20 minutes and then wrap up. As audience members, you can join in the discussion, and we encourage you to do so by entering your questions on Slido. sli.do, hashtag IWDYYC 2021. This event is for you, so please submit your questions throughout the presentations and we'll address them during the panel discussions. Now I'd like to introduce Raina Rainiak, Business Development for Gemini Fabrication, to introduce our speakers.
Thanks, Val, and thanks, Donovan, for that opening monologue 3 times. It was great. So I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Gayathri Shukla. She's the Digital Transformation Leader at Scovan Engineering and founder of Campfire Kinship. I will be presenting Gayathri on behalf of our gold sponsor, PTW Energy Services. PTW is an industrial service specialist company providing construction, fabrication, and maintenance services through a strategic network across North America. Safety is a core value at PTW, and they are always committed to providing the safest work environment possible for both employees and clients. Gayathri Shukla holds an electrical engineering degree from the University of Calgary and an executive MBA from Queen's University. With over 16 years of experience, Gayathri currently leads digital mining strategy and innovation programs at Scovan Engineering. She started her career in Fort McMurray, where she gained a strong technical depth in the automation discipline. She later moved to Fort Hills, where she was responsible for managing the delivery of an integrated schedule and roadmap to support the $17 billion facility's safe transition to first oil. In her MBA project, Gayathri focused on digital transformation in mining and how to unleash innovation by tapping into the lived experiences of stakeholders. Gayathri is also an avid volunteer in the community. She serves as a board member at the Calgary Immigrant Women's Association. And she recently founded Campfire Kinship, a storytelling venture that highlights the journeys of diverse, everyday role models. She is a mom to 2 school-aged kids and in her spare time enjoys hiking and traveling with her family. Please welcome Gayathri.
Thank you for the introduction, Reina, and hello, everyone. When Valerie invited me to speak on this theme, Choose to Challenge, I've reflected on what it is that I think will move the needle on gender equality. And so I am honored to be here to speak on this theme for International Women's Day. I'd like to begin this talk with a question. Have you ever gazed up at the starry night sky and wondered in awe at the billions of stars out there? As the astronomer Carl Sagan said about the Earth, we are the pale blue dot. Has it made you feel humbled to see just how small we are? And if I can put it this way, how big the other is? Humbled. I believe leadership is also an expression of humility. It's about standing in front of something much bigger than ourselves and realizing this is not at all about us. For International Women's Day, I choose to challenge how we show up for those we lead. And I refer to the term leader, in its broadest context. I believe we're all leaders, regardless of our formal titles or positions, because we all have the ability to impact those in our lives. And no, I'm not here to lecture you on what leadership is or isn't. I don't profess that I know it all. I would, though, like to share with you 2 personal stories that illustrate this idea of how we show up for those we lead. The first story is about my journey into engineering. The leader in the story is actually my high school teacher. I'm probably dating myself showing this picture, as you can see from the cars on the road and a can of Coke costing 50 cents. So this is going way back. But so do all our career decisions. They start early, so I'm taking you back to grade 11. I had just entered a brand new high school, brand new city, brand new country. Actually, my family had just immigrated to Canada. And as is common for many immigrant families, academic achievement was very much valued in mine. My dad was an engineer, and I was set to follow in his footsteps. So I found myself enrolling in this advanced curriculum called International Baccalaureate, or IB for short. And for the most part, it was a positive experience. My new classmates were quite welcoming, even though I would say I was one amongst a handful of students of South Asian origin. And for the most part, I found that I had to do a bit of a catch-up. Because I was in IB and I joined in the middle of high school, I had to catch up on the subjects covered in grade 10. And there was one subject in particular that I found challenging. Now, this was a prerequisite to engineering, so it was important that I did well. So I diligently did my homework, and one day after class, I decided that I'd approach the teacher with some questions that I had on the material. The moment I asked my question, I immediately regretted it. The look on her face signaled annoyance. "You're not gonna make it," she said. Feeling flustered, the blood's rushing into my face. I'm probably turning beet red, but thanks to the extra melanin in my skin, you can't tell. So I proceed to explain that I just moved from India and that I'm catching up with the material, and she cut me off. And she said, "Well, based on your question, you're not even getting the basics, so I don't think you're gonna pass this class." So that day when I went home, I was heartbroken. And as is typical for many women who question themselves and fall into this trap of self-doubt, I started to question myself. She said, I'm not even getting the basics. What am I doing thinking I can take engineering? The next morning, self-doubt was replaced with a different feeling. I would call it self-righteousness. Nobody dare tell me what I cannot do. Not only am I going to pass this class, I am going to ace it. And so I studied hard. I even enlisted my dad's help, made him relearn stoichiometry and calculus and all of that fun high school stuff. It helps having a dad for an engineer. And so I did. I aced the class. I aced the IB exams, which got me 2, not 1, 2 university level credits. I got into engineering, and I even got scholarships that paid off half my tuition. Now, I tell you this story because when I think back to that leader, I want to ask, how many of you have been told, directly or indirectly, that you can't do something? Now, if we were in person, I would ask for a show of hands. But given that it is 2021 and we're still talking gender equality, I am going to assume that there's a fair number of us who have faced what we call bias. And I also want to ask that despite facing bias, how many of you still go, you don't think I can do that? Watch me. Right? Watch me. What is that? That sense of redemption? Hang on to that thought for a moment, because I am going to come back to that. Now I'm going to switch gears and share with you another story about a second leader who happens to be my mentor at Suncor. This is fast forwarding several years. By this point, I had gained excellent technical experience working up in Fort McMurray. I had progressed into formal leadership roles. And I really found myself wanting to round out my technical background with some business education. So I was toying with the idea of an MBA. The only catch was, by this point in my personal life, I was also a mom to 2 kids. Quite young, they were only 6 and 3 at the time. So while the idea of an MBA was enticing, I was terrified by the thought of having to juggle school and kids and work. My husband, Kernal, also at Suncor, was flying in and out of Fort McMurray 7 days on, 7 days off, to add to that mix. So one day I decided that I would talk to my mentor and confide honestly, in how I was feeling torn about this decision. She listened to me carefully, and I still remember her words. She said, Gayathri, I can see why you have reservations. And if there's anyone I know who can take on a challenge like this, it's you. So that day when I went home, I had a little skip in my step. Kernal, perceptive guy, without missing a beat, he goes, well, you look extra happy today. What happened at work? So I tell him about this conversation. And again, without skipping a beat, he says, yeah, it'll be hard, but you know what? We'll figure it out. If this is what you want, go for it. And so I did. I took the plunge into the Queen's MBA. And I wish I can tell you it was all smooth sailing, but that, of course, would be a lie. I felt I was hit by a ton of bricks. I remember one distinct, grueling moment sitting at a Starbucks. I've been sitting at the same Starbucks, same seat, for 8 days in a row, 8 hours a day, working on this paper that you heard about on digital innovation. So one morning, I've been staring at this same page for 2 hours, my head's fried. I decided to text Kernal just to check in and see how he's doing with the kids. And back comes this response with a picture of them at Callaway Park. It took every fiber of my being not to scream in that moment. What am I doing here when I could be with my family enjoying the summer day? That was one of many grueling moments that tested my self-discipline. And I learned that the only way out of a challenge like that is through it. So I finished the thesis. I finished the MBA with flying colors. And I know, hands down, I couldn't have done it alone. I leaned on my family a lot. I had a great support network in the MBA. I had a boss at work who gave me interesting assignments in line with my coursework. I had leaders coaching me on everything from accounting and finance to career paths. And Andrea, I remember you and I having one of those discussions, which really helped me figure out my next role. And most of all, I go back to that initial vote of confidence that I had from my mentor, who was cheerleading me the whole way. Now, I want to return to the point on leadership that I began this talk with. You see, when I compare both these experiences, I see parallels and I see a difference. In terms of parallels, I learned that to be resilient means to never give up in the face of challenge. I learned that your relationships and your village is essential to success. And in both cases, I still ended up achieving my end goal. I still got my degree. But what was different? And if I were to boil it down to one thing, what was different was the impact that these two leaders had on me. What was different was one leader who did not believe and came from a place of lack, and the other leader who believed and came from a place of potential. Now, setting aside individual differences and stepping back from the individuals themselves, I've reflected a bit on what spurs this difference in leadership behavior. And here's the conclusion I've come to. It starts with humility. It starts with acknowledging that we don't have all of the answers. We may not know everything about the other person. And let's admit, we may even be carrying some unconscious bias that we've just been conditioned to accept by default. And if it starts with that self-awareness, it's then about choosing to see further than that bias. Choosing to pick up the other person and taking a chance on them anyway. Humility doesn't mean we see ourselves as less than. And it doesn't mean that we put others on a pedestal either. It just means we see potential. And then we help others see their own potential and take them to places they may not have gone themselves, not because they have to, but because they want to. And because they know why. They know why. They know they matter. Like that starry night sky, I believe that humble leaders see a purpose larger than themselves. It's not at all about them or their titles or their prizes. And so they say, you learn a lot from your leaders, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And then you're supposed to incorporate these lessons into your own life. And so I too have been very intentional about how I show up as a leader. And I'll be the first to admit I am far from perfect. Because let's face it, while all this sounds wonderful in theory, we've all had those moments. We've all had those long days where instead of showing empathy to someone, we're thinking like that high school teacher did. Why aren't you getting this already? Right? And while that's a normal, natural reaction, I'd like to offer to you that even in those moments, we have an opportunity to express our humility. A really great professor of mine from the MBA, Julian Barling, says, what's the smallest thing you can do to tell someone they're trusted? Let that sink in. What's the smallest thing you can do to tell someone they're trusted? I've thought about this question. The smallest thing I can do to tell someone they're trusted is to learn their story. And then it's to help them embrace who they are, and especially the parts of them that make them different and unique. I believe the smallest thing we can all do is to truly listen and see one another. And let me just state the obvious here. It's easy to see and listen to someone who already looks and sounds and thinks like you. It's easy to empathize and agree with someone who already agrees back with you. It's a lot harder when there's differences. Difference in way of thinking, difference in background, race, gender, a multitude of diversity. And so how do we listen and see in that case? I'd like to offer you 2 takeaways. Number 1, it starts with ourselves. Own your story. Be clear on what it is that you stand for. What are your values? Your values are your integrity and your compass. Who is it that you want to serve? What mark do you want to leave? What are your strengths? This is not about fixing and assimilating to fit in. This is about enabling and emboldening ourselves to advance on our own terms. Own your story. And once you've done that inner work, step 2, de-center. De-center, it just means being curious about someone else's perspective without jumping in with our own judgments. It doesn't take huge strides for huge change. Again, what's the smallest thing you can do to tell someone they're trusted? Can you check your bias? Can you learn someone's story? And if you're looking for inspiration on stories, please visit my Instagram page, Campfire Kinship. I have featured over 150 stories of regular people like you and I creating an impact since the pandemic hit. And speaking of the pandemic, our lives were turned upside down collectively almost a year ago. It would be an understatement to say that we're in a period of significant change and challenge. Our industry is changing, technology is changing, we've got job losses, mental health issues, the list goes on. Now more than ever, we have to show up for each other with empathy. And we've already seen great examples of that over the past year. Let's continue to do more. Let's continue to innovate. And by the way, how do we innovate? It's by leveraging our diversity. It's by leveraging the complementarity brought on by our differences. So let's not try to reduce difference. Now more than ever, I believe it is critical that we all build our capacity to appreciate difference. And that requires humility. Now, my story wouldn't be complete if I didn't share with you the outcome of the story with my high school teacher. After the course had ended, she actually came up to me and she apologized. She said, "Gayathri, great marks. I underestimated you, but I'm glad you proved me wrong." That moment also taught me a valuable lesson. Remember that feeling of redemption and self-righteousness that I was talking about? Well, that's not humility, is it? That's not humility if we feel like we've got to go through life with a chip on our shoulders. Over the years, I've learned that even when we're on the receiving end of bias, most of the time, not always, most of the time, it's not intended to hurt us. And it's largely unconscious. So even in that moment, as hard as it might seem, we have an opportunity to de-center, to not take it personally. to try and understand where the other person's coming from and to call them in with compassion and educate them. In this case, I do believe that my teacher was genuinely concerned about my passing the course and was trying to alert me in the way she knew how. And so now I would like to wrap up this talk. I would like for all of us to choose to challenge. Let's choose to challenge how we show up for those we lead. Let's choose to challenge labels that limit people. Let's choose to celebrate the accomplishments of women all over the world who work hard daily to create an impact. And look around you. There are many such women. There are women on the stage. There are women in your communities. There are women in your companies. There are women in your families. These are the women who step up and rise into their potential, who show up for each other with empathy, who bring creative solutions to complex problems, who step up with leadership and volunteerism and activism to drive forward the issues that they care about. These women stand in their truth and they own their story. And that's what I'm most proud of. Thank you for listening. Thank you to Scovan Engineering and all our sponsors for this wonderful event. Enjoy the rest of the event.
Thank you so much, Gayathri, for that beautiful story. I'd like to introduce Shanna Boyd. Shanna Boyd is the Senior Manager of Engineering for the Conventional Pipelines Business Unit at Pembina Pipeline Corporation. I'll be presenting Shanna on behalf of our gold sponsor, Colliers International. Colliers International is a Canadian-owned commercial real estate company with a global reach. Colliers has over 15,000 people in more than 4,000 offices in 68 countries around the world. Whether you're a developer, investor, landlord, or tenant, Colliers is a partner who invests in seeing their clients accelerate their success. Shanna is the Senior Manager of Engineering for Pembina's Conventional Pipeline Business Unit, where she is responsible for systems design and optimization and capital project execution. Shanna has over 20 years of experience working in the energy industry. She started her career in engineering consulting and has held progressively more senior roles in the upstream energy business. She led oil sands development teams at Devon, Canada, before taking on the role of VP of Capital Projects and then transitioned to VP of Production for Primrose and Wolf Lake at Canadian Natural. She has a passion for bridging different perspectives and working with cohesive, high-performing teams to deliver exceptional results. Shanna has a degree in mechanical engineering from McGill University and is a member of APEGA. She is married and is a mother to 2 amazing teenagers and enjoys testing her resilience with challenging biking, hiking, and skiing trips in the mountains. Please welcome Shanna Boyd.
Can everybody hear me? Good? All right. Thank you. Good afternoon. Thanks. One more. Ooh. Or not. There we go. All right. Thank you, everybody. Thanks to Scovan and to our sponsors for having me today. And I'd also like to just acknowledge our IT team here right now, because as most of you have noticed, we've had a couple of challenges, and I really appreciate how calm everybody is staying, and that's really hard in this case. So thank you for that. Initially, when I started to think about what challenge and resilience meant to me, I wasn't sure whether my experiences were worthwhile enough to talk about. The struggles that many people, both women and men, are experiencing today are beyond the scope of my experience. However, I had a good friend give me some good advice. She said, don't discount the things that have been hard for you. They may not have been hard in comparison to what others are facing today and the difficulties that both women and men are having, but they were still real for you. And so with that in mind, and with the recognition that I'm very fortunate to be sitting with you here today, I wanted to share some of my story. I started university in the Faculty of Arts at McGill and tried out physics and physiology before graduating with a degree in mechanical engineering. I landed in Calgary when I graduated, and after a job hunt with sort of the requisite rejection letters, a friend connected me with an engineering consulting company, and I started my first job as a facilities engineer. For the early part of my career, I often felt out of place. My job involved design and construction for facilities and pipelines, so I did most of my work in the office and sometimes went out to the field for startups. Field visits were challenging on many levels. I was inexperienced and I doubted my own abilities. Everything was completely new, and I was almost always the only woman out there. When working in the field, a typical day, so in the evening, we would all meet for dinner and drinks, and it went late into the night usually, and required me to figure out how to not keep up as everybody was ordering rounds. I'd come home after a couple of days, completely exhausted, but feeling like I'd learned something and that I'd made some progress. And while I must have seemed a bit out of place to them as well, I really enjoyed the people I was working with, and I loved the satisfaction of solving problems together. When I got married, our construction supervisor gave me this. It's a flange and chain, and it's got a question mark on it with my name because I couldn't decide whether or not I wanted to change my last name. They didn't make me wear it in the bar, fortunately, but it meant a lot to me because it meant that at some level I'd been accepted even though I'd felt pretty out of place. I think part of this was learning to both fit in and to also bring some of myself to the team. I have one other funny story of resilience from around the same time period. We had just finished a fairly complex gas plant project, and our company president wanted to see it as part of his field visit. I was still pretty junior and was excited to have the chance to meet the president of the company. So the first day we did our usual, picked up lunch and drove to site. The tour was scheduled for the second day. So that night, I was driving and the president of our company was sitting in the passenger seat, and halfway there I started to feel really bad again. So I had to actually pull the truck over to the side of the highway to throw up. Fortunately, things improved from there and we were able to get through the plant tour successfully. I'd hoped to make a good impression, and while it didn't go as planned, it was human and the best I could do. He definitely remembered who I was after that, too. And I learned a very valuable side lesson, which I'll share, and it is that you never, ever eat egg salad sandwiches from gas stations. In all seriousness, though, I think those early experiences taught me how important it is to persevere through tough situations. And they also gave me some confidence that I could succeed even when things weren't exactly as I thought they should be. After about 5 years working in facilities, I decided that this wasn't where I wanted my career to be long-term. And so I applied and got accepted to law school. It was a fork in the road for me. But after a lot of deliberation, I decided not to go back to school. Having it as a choice, though, was what gave me the courage to ask for a different position at work in an environment where that wasn't usually done. And although my boss was surprised, and I don't think necessarily pleased about the idea, he recognized that I needed to try something different, and because I had done some really good work for him, he found a way to transition me into a reservoir engineering role. The new job felt like a better fit, and I was really excited about the change. Unfortunately, this ended up happening at about the same time as my husband was finishing his PhD. In academics, it's important to get experience in different universities, and he was offered a postdoc position in Switzerland. So while living in Europe sounded fun, it also felt really uncomfortable because it meant giving up the credibility I'd established in the 7 years or so that I'd been working, giving up some of our income, and leaving my network of friends behind, all to follow his career. So we did end up going, and the travel was definitely fun, but working through some loneliness and learning a new language and figuring out all the little things that are different about living in a new country were worth way more to me. And without the work experience for him, he wouldn't have been able to continue his career in academics back here. So we came back to Calgary just in time for our son to be born, and this created a whole new dynamic in our life. I'd been off work for 2 years and was really keen to get back. I was fortunate that my previous boss opened the door for me to return to work part-time. However, there was this new little person in our lives who didn't figure this was such a great idea. All my idealistic views on how good daycare was for socializing children were blown out of the water with tears and colds and general exhaustion across our whole family. When I think about this now and I think how hard this felt at the time, it seems really small in comparison to what families are doing today. With limited access to childcare and kids in and out of schools and working from home, it's much harder right now. When our daughter was born, I'd been on staff for less than a year and was actually required to quit my job because I wasn't eligible for mat leave. So I decided that to keep my brain active, I would stay home with the kids and do my MBA part-time at U of C. This was a great idea until work called and asked if I'd come back again. So now I had 2 children under the age of 3, work downtown, and graduate classes at night. And my husband was in the midst of establishing his career as well. I loved all 3, but after getting halfway through the MBA, I decided the cost was too high for our family. When everyone was healthy and things were going perfectly, we could manage it, but it was completely precarious. All it took was for one of us to get a cold to throw everything off and send the stress levels through the roof. It was a really difficult decision to walk away from that, especially having gotten so far into it. But I wasn't prepared to sacrifice either my job or my family for it. And I really appreciated hearing what Gayathri had to say, because I hadn't heard it before today either. But what I really like about it is one of the things that I think is so important, that we all have to make difficult decisions that are right for us. And they're different for different people. And I loved hearing her perspective on that. And I made a little different choice with that, but it was the right choice at the time. So it's an interesting comparison, and thank you for sharing. The years with young children and demanding work were very challenging. I was still working in an environment where I was usually the only woman, but I was lucky to have found male mentors that were willing to advocate for my working part-time. And having that flexibility allowed me to stay in my career. It also made me learn how to be absolutely efficient with my time and to focus on what was really important. Although it was busy, I also think it made me a better employee and a better mom. I loved my time at work, and I made the most of every minute, and I loved the time I had at home with my kids. As the kids got older, I was able to increase the number of hours I worked and gradually progressed into more senior leadership roles. Every time I took on a role of increasing responsibility, there was a conversation about whether or not I could do it part-time. I owe a huge amount to the people who pushed our organization to take that chance. They believed that we could do something different, and I worked hard to make sure that it was beneficial not just for me, but also for the company. At a certain point, my husband started to call me out for working full-time and getting paid part-time. But as a professional in a leadership role, I felt that was part of the deal, and it was worth it. It was so worth it for me to have the flexibility in my schedule. When I was preparing this talk, a friend said something that caught me quite off guard about this time. She said that my working part-time, particularly at a manager level, broke barriers, and it allowed her to both ask for and receive the flexibility to manage her work schedule when she had kids. I hope that that kind of example is something we see more of. And as we adjust to the realities of COVID, that we can be even more open to new ways of doing things. We're experiencing something completely unprecedented with remote work right now, and I think we've got the opportunity to use it and learn how we can both be more flexible and more efficient. After a number of years working through increasingly more senior leadership roles and getting back to full-time, I was promoted to vice president at Devon. And surprisingly to me, it was into a capital projects role. The capital projects group included facilities engineering, which I talked about a bit here, but it also included a bunch of teams that I knew nothing about, like supply chain and drilling. And by this time, I'd spent most of my career working in development, reservoir, and strategic planning type jobs. So my skill set was unusual, which again made me question what I had to offer, and was again way outside my comfort zone. The nature of the role also meant that I was now in a position that I didn't have to completely fit myself into how things were already being done. I could set expectations that might be a little different, or I could just make sure that there were washrooms on site. But really for me, this meant more collaboration and a deeper understanding of other perspectives. That's what helped create bridges between our team and other areas of the business like operations and development. I think it also helped us to understand business risks better and to make more well-considered decisions. And this is something I think that women are often really good at. When I look back at these stories and other challenges in my career, there are three things that I think have consistently helped me become more resilient. The first is to keep doing uncomfortable things. When things are hard, we learn and grow the most. Every time I took on a new role, there was a certain amount of discomfort and often a certain amount of fear with it. But by practicing being uncomfortable, I've become better at it, and I feel like I can stretch more each time. I still make mistakes, and it's still not easy, but I'm continuously learning, and I'm faster at trusting my instincts now. The second thing is about making decisions that feel right to you. Ooh, and I've lost my text. Okay, well, we'll go with this anyways. It's about being authentic. So this slide should say be authentic in the center of it. We all have to make difficult decisions, and most of my big ones required something to be left behind. Half of an MBA doesn't really look good on your resume. But for me, it was really important that those decisions felt right because it made it easier to be committed to my choice and to be okay with the trade-offs. I've had a couple of job changes in the last 2 years that started when Devon Energy decided to divest its Canadian operation. With the sale, I was given the chance to work at Canadian Natural. When I started, it was a steep learning curve. The discipline was new. I'd never worked in production before. The assets were new, so I had no technical background to lean on. The people were new, so I had no credibility, and the culture was new. It was overwhelming at times, but without a doubt, one of the best learning experiences of my career. It gave me the opportunity to challenge all of my biases and really look at how things could be done differently and successfully. And while it was a great learning experience, it also didn't feel like it was a good long-term fit for me. I chose instead to move from a vice president role at Canadian Natural to a senior manager role at Pembina Pipelines so that I could get exposure to a different part of the energy industry. And again, there's a trade-off in that choice for me. Today, I'm excited to be getting up to speed on how the midstream business works and starting to build some commercial skills, which is fun for me. The last thing I wanted to talk about is looking after your support networks. And this slide should say, look after your support networks. We all need help to do this because it's hard. Having strong networks, both professionally and personally, I think is critical. Finding people that you can ask for professional advice is important, and I've needed advice on different things at different times in my career. I feel fortunate to have gotten to know some extraordinary people at work. When I think about the people who supported me over the years, what stands out is how different they've all been. Some were bosses, some were peers, and some were on my team. Most were men because there just haven't been that many women. Some were outside of my organization and some were inside. They often weren't people that I had much in common with on the surface, but there was always some connection, and it was usually because of a shared set of values. And some of the best advice I got wasn't what I necessarily wanted to hear. But that was the honesty and the authenticity, and I think that's what made it really valuable. My support network outside of work is what keeps me grounded and reminds me that I'm not only about my job. For me, having a connection to friends and family has given me the strength and courage to make tough choices. It's also provided me with a safe space to bounce ideas around. In putting together this talk, I was so grateful that I had some people that were willing to not only provide feedback, but also to challenge my ideas on different things around this talk. I've had a great experience working in the energy industry. It's been a wild ride sometimes and always a steep learning curve. But all the way through, there have been exceptional people. And the connections with people and the satisfaction that comes with succeeding as a team are what matters to me. We've got a lot of challenges in front of us right now, but I believe we've got the talent and spirit and the resilience to succeed. So that's what I would like to choose when we choose to challenge. And I think it'll be way more fun if we can do it together. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that story, Shanna. Now I'd like to introduce our final speaker, Andrea Decor. Andrea Decor is the Vice President of Strategy and Corporate Development at Suncor Energy. And I'll be presenting Andrea on behalf of our gold sponsor, Suncor Energy. Suncor is Canada's leading integrated energy company. Their purpose is to provide trusted energy that enhances people's lives while caring for each other and the earth. Suncor is on a journey to become an inclusive and respectful workplace. We are stronger together, especially when our together includes everyone. Andrea Decor is currently the Vice President of Strategy at Corporate Development, and in this role, she is responsible for corporate strategy, mergers and acquisitions, and new business development. In her free time, she enjoys hiking, skiing, running, playing golf, and spending time with her husband and 2 children aged 14 and 11. Please welcome Andrea Decor.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. So it's interesting when you're asked to participate in something like this. You have to reflect on a career, a 25-year career that seems to have gone by in the blink of an eye. So the 2 reflections I've had, one relates to conflict and the other relates to failure and how you deal with each one. And but before I kind of, come to the conclusion, my summary on those 2 topics, when I was writing my notes, I thought to myself, the largest opportunities I've had in my career, the biggest moves I've made in my career have really been the culmination of times of fairly significant challenge, actually. And I think what's differentiated me and what I see differentiate a lot of my peers is how they respond to challenge. So just a little bit of background on me to give you a little bit of context for these stories. Unlike a lot of ladies in energy and the ladies that you've heard from today, I'm a lawyer by training. I don't have a technical background. But I I started my career at a great law firm in Calgary, Ballum McInnes, and storied oil and gas firm. Mr. Ballum literally wrote the book on oil and gas law in Canada. And he wrote a whole bunch of other novels, murder mysteries and things like that about the oil and gas industry in the 1950s. And he was a great mentor, and he made me fall in love with oil and gas industry and with energy. But as sort of glamorous as that time period was, because it was a more glamorous time period than we have today, I would say, for oil and gas in the city of Calgary, it was a little bit mortifying, the hours that I had to work. And I know lawyers still work these crazy hours, but it was, when I look back, I think about it, it was overwhelming. I remember the first month I was articling, the guy who was actually my mentor, who's a fabulous lawyer, Mitch Shire, he said to me, okay, here's a bit of work, Andrea, and by the way, I'm gonna need it done for tomorrow. And I thought, you gotta be kidding me, I can't get this done. I worked all night, and I was super unhappy and resentful about the fact that this guy had made me work all night. I handed it in, and he said to me, oh, that looks good, thanks a lot. And I said, well, I actually worked all night to get it done. He was like, okay, great, good for you, thanks a lot. And that was the first of about 50 all-nighters over the course of, my 4.5 years at Ballum. And they were a great law firm, and had some great role models, particularly Leslie Friars, who's a great lady lawyer and great role model. But the funny thing about practicing law is it kind of, it instilled in me a work ethic that I almost can't get rid of today. It made working long hours seem like the norm, which is not great, but it is also great, because when you practice something, you get good at it. And when you get good at something, you start to feel confident about it. And, confidence breeds advancement. So, in a way, I'm really grateful for that, the drive that those hours created. And the other thing that practicing law gave me was comfort with conflict. Your job as a lawyer is to advocate for your client. And you're an advocate, so it's an adversarial situation. By definition, there's a counterparty and they have an opposite view. And so you get very comfortable with the concept of, dealing with people day in, day out, hour in and hour out, that have opposing views. And I think I took it for granted when I moved to the corporate world that conflict was a regular part of everyday life, and it can be constructive, and it should be constructive. It should be about listening to other people's opinions and getting their perspective and modifying your behavior and your own opinions based on somebody else's input. My experience has been that people are generally very uncomfortable with conflict, and I think it can be super productive. So on that note, I want to tell you a story about conflict. I made the choice to move from private practice into an in-house position to improve my hours a little bit and follow my love of business in the oil and gas industry. So I showed up at Petro-Canada, and I had come from a world where, huge camaraderie with peers my age. We're working hard, but we're all in together. And I moved to Petro-Canada not long after it had privatized. I think I was about 27 or 28, and the person closest in age to me in the Petro-Canada Law Department was my boss, who was 50. And in the 5 years I was at Petro-Canada, I went for beers one time. So I moved from this, huge, great social circle of people that was, my law firm to nothing, which was kind of funny. I literally showed up there, and after a couple months, I thought, what have I done? I've made a terrible mistake. But I was treated really well, and I was younger than everybody, and I had a different perspective. I worked hard. So I had a lot of opportunities. they gave me a lot of opportunities, and I was very grateful for that. And in one particular instance, I was the lawyer on a file with Suncor on the other side of the file. And on the other side of the file was the general counsel of Suncor, the assistant general counsel, and two of the top partners at Blake Castles and Graydon. We'd negotiate the contract during the day, and in the evening, one of the lawyers from Blake's and I would go draft the legal documents. We did a massive amount of work in 3 weeks. Got the deal done, negotiated, everything was papered up. About the 23rd of December, the general counsel of Suncor, I remember I was at Petro-Canada at the time, called me and said, Andrea, great, you've done a great job, really happy you've got this all done, but my credit people tell me that we're gonna need a netting agreement. There's a lot of credit exposure on either side, and so we're gonna need to do that. I said, Terry, no problem, we can do that, I'm on it. He said to me, well, actually, we're gonna need that done before Christmas. I said, Terry, that's like 2 days away. And he said, yep, that's what we're gonna need, so get right on it. And I said, Terry, like, with all due respect, we've been working like 24 hours a day for 3 weeks straight, not possible. And by the way, this contract doesn't start up for 2 years, so like, nothing pressing here. And he said to me, he actually started to bully me. And he said to me, you know what, Andrea, you're gonna do this, and you're gonna like it, you're gonna shut up about it, and you're gonna get it done. I said, Terry, I'm not gonna do it. Listen, I will give you a solicitor's undertaking that it will be done, you know, by the end of December, by the end of January. And he said to me, okay, I want an undertaking, but I want it signed by the CEO of Petro-Canada. And I said, Terry, that's embarrassing. I'm not gonna go ask the CEO to give an undertaking that will provide a document. It's, you know, it's innocuous, like it's just a transactional document. And he put the pressure on me in like an unbelievable way, started badgering me. And I remember he kind of finished with, you know, I'm telling you you're gonna do this, and what are you gonna tell me to change my mind? And I remember saying to him, Terry, I'm gonna tell you to fuck off. Pardon my French. And I actually heard him giggle on the other end of the line. I think he was enjoying the verbal, you know, jousting. And then of course, I went home and I thought, oh my God, I can't believe what I have just done. I've just sworn at the general counsel of Suncor. You know, whatever, I hung my head for the next month. A couple months later, I got a call from his assistant. She said, Terry would like to have lunch with you. And I was like, I went home to my husband, who actually knew this fellow, and told him this. And he said to me, Andrea, he wants to hire you. And I said, I don't think so. Like, it was very acrimonious. And he said, no, Terry doesn't just go for lunch with people, Andrea. So sure enough, I sat down at lunch, and he said to me, you should be working at Suncor. And he offered me a job, honestly, I could not resist. He actually said to me, he said, what's the job you have always wanted to have? And I said, I love marketing and trading. I love energy, you know, commodities. I want to be in that business. And he offered me a great job. And that was the start of a career that I absolutely love. But it always, you know, I moved from there to Petro-Canada. I moved from there into the business side of marketing and trading. I had a dream job. And then I had a kid. I went on maternity leave, my second maternity leave, and I was forgotten about. I was ready to come back to work, and I couldn't get the attention of my boss. When I finally got his attention, he said to me, yeah, so-and-so's got a job for you, call him. I called him, he said, yeah, well, we've got a job for you. It's director of economics, running the financial analysis group. And I said to this fellow, I'm not a financial analyst. I actually not so comfortable with that. And he said to me, well, I guess you have a couple of choices. You could choose to decline the job and quit. You could take the job and do a poor job at it, and we will fire you. Or you could take the job, figure it out, and you'll be successful, you know, at Suncor. And I remember I was mortified, actually. And I had a conversation with my neighbor and friend Sarah Hoyt, who's a fabulous headhunter. And I told her this story, and she was like, I said to her, I'm going to quit. It was like, I was mortified. Who would treat somebody like that? And she said, don't quit. Like, it's a lot easier to find a job when you've got a job. I'll help you find a job. Take the job and get everything you can out of it. Learn something from it. And honestly, that was some of the best advice I could have ever received. So I took the job. I crammed for it. I took my husband's CFA, practice books and practice exams and taught myself how to do discounted cash flow economics. I showed up. I read, the first 90 days about leadership in a new role. I showed up at work, and my staff had been, this is actually after the Suncor Petro-Canada merger, so that was another lesson. Never leave a place on bad terms, because you never know when you might have to come back together with those people. But my staff had all been Petro-Canada employees, and they were all later in their career. And they were really unhappy about the merger. They were really unhappy because their leader had been laid off through the merger. They were really unhappy about having a young lady leader who actually knew not the first thing about, financial analysis and decision making, decision support. It was strained, to say the least. Like, it was really uncomfortable. And in fact, there was one meeting in particular where there was basically a revolt by my staff, where they eventually said to me, we actually don't think you're competent to have this job. And I, at that point, kind of realized, I resigned myself to the fact I'm going to have to admit that I am not the best person for this role. And so I basically said to them, I will admit I do not have the experience to do this job. I'm uncomfortable with it, but I'm going to do the best I can. And I will do everything I can to help you be successful and to make your jobs easy and to make you love your jobs. If you could just bear with me, I'll put the time and energy into learning this material and developing these skills. And I think I was so desperate that they took pity on me. And so they taught me financial analysis. And the crazy thing is that it's probably the skill that has held me in best stead in my career. It was absolutely uncomfortable, but it's a crucial skill for business, to succeed in business. And I was forced to learn leadership skills that I never otherwise would have learned. So what could have been, and I've seen a bunch of other ladies in my career have this same experience coming back from maternity leave, where you get forgotten about, you get put into roles that you don't want. I think the challenge is to try to navigate that the best you can. If you can navigate challenge well, it differentiates you. And the irony of the whole thing is, after all of that was said and done, a few friends of mine came back to me and said, actually, we have some other career opportunities for you, jobs elsewhere. And by that point, about 6 months had gone on, and I had really come to love the team I was working with, and I'd finally earned the trust of these people, and I felt like I couldn't leave them. I felt a loyalty to them, so I declined the other opportunities, which is a bit ironic. And then finally, I wanted to tell the story of the East Tank Farm transaction that I was involved in, which was the culmination of 5 years worth of work. And I would say a lesson in patience and resilience and listening to people. I went into it not knowing anything about Indigenous history in Canada. I learned more about people and about different cultures and about Canadian history and about compromise and listening than I could have in any other situation. But it was adversarial. It was slow and painful. And when it was all said and done, I had a day when I thought the whole thing was done, and the day fell apart. And I remember being at the vet, getting my dog spayed and neutered at 8 a.m. And I got a call from one of the First Nations that was involved to say, you know what, this doesn't work for us. We need something different. And then I got a call from Mark Little, who's now the CEO of Suncor, to say, Andrea, Chief Boucher's called me and he's not happy. He says you're not dealing with this effectively. And then he said to me, and why is all that barking going on in the background? Anyway, to make a very long story short, that day was a disaster. And I listened to Shanna talk about, balancing life and career and home. And sometimes, like that day, you feel like you're balancing on the edge of a knife. It was not a good day. But at the end of the day, I got the deal done. I got home. I had a great evening with my kids. I visited with my mom, who was visiting from Edmonton. But I was climbing into bed and I realized, I think I've just done the biggest deal of my career. I put a deal together with 2 First Nations that gives them $20 million a year in free cash flow. It's revenue that funds their social systems and the infrastructure in the community. And nobody actually cared. Nobody noticed. But what are you going to do? Like, you get on with it. The positive side of that story is I was telling that story to one of my colleagues, and she said to me, well, I want to celebrate it with you. And, a couple of days later, she brought me a gift, and it was a few bracelets. And they say East Tank Farm 2017. And honestly, that was very impactful for me because it was about women celebrating the achievements of other women. I think, we don't celebrate achievements enough. We don't forgive failures enough. And we're not comfortable enough with conflict. And we don't use conflict for innovation and to promote creativity. We shun or try to avoid conflict. We try to pretend that failures don't exist or didn't happen. And we downplay successes. And I guess the thing I would like to ask everybody listening is that we stick together as a community. We embrace diversity. We embrace conflict because it's about differences of opinion. We forgive each other's failures, and we help celebrate each other's successes. And I think that's what International Women's Day is all about. So thank you for inviting me to be here, and I look forward to the panel.
Thank you so much. Am I on? Thank you so much, Andrea. I really appreciate that. And I'm just going to, I don't know if the audience can see this, but these are some images of your, the signing of the deal. The signing of the deal, which was such a momentous occasion. And you're right, we do need to recognize and celebrate those moments. Thank you. So now we're going to start with the panel discussion. I hope for all of you out there in the virtual world, you're still hanging in there. Grab a glass of wine. Just join us. Let's have a conversation. And yes, we do want to hear from you. So don't forget to join us on slido.ca, or sorry, I think it's just www.sli.do, and it'll get you right to the app. And then the hashtag is #IWDYYC2021. There has been, I actually got shivers during so many of your presentations because the authenticity was so real. The ability for just knowing that, sharing personal stories. These women came up here and shared those stories, and it's not easy. It's not easy to create that, put yourself in that vulnerable position and to be authentic like that. So thank you so much for doing that today, all of you. I appreciate that. So we'll start, I'm going to sit down, and then we'll have the panel discussion so I can speak to my audience and you guys can we can see each other. And questions, I will be moderating questions, so do please enter your questions in for Slido. So I think what really struck me about all three presentations was there was some really common themes resonating throughout all of those presentations. Number one, I think too, that everyone said was get uncomfortable, is to be uncomfortable, but also still be authentic, be your authentic self, and celebrate. And support, look after your support networks. And, Shanna, you kind of pinpointed those three things really well, which I appreciated. And I know that, but really that was sort of a running theme throughout all of out of all of it. And we also learned about, celebrating each other's achievements and conflict. So some really great themes there on conflict. And I find, and maybe I'll start with that, because I find that often, when we're in an organization, we do shy away from conflict. We just try to, I find, sometimes just to say yes and go with the status quo and, move forward with what the group is thinking. And sometimes you may have a different perspective because you have a different discipline or background or experience. And it takes a lot of courage to speak up against that conflict. But that is exactly what I think our organizations need, is to start challenging or just questioning and providing that conflict. And that's when we get true innovation, true change, taking to that, our industry to the next level. So can I just get your thoughts on that? And I don't know if you want to answer this, Andrea, around conflict, or whoever would like to chime in. Like what you can take on what your thoughts are around how you can see conflict maybe helping organizations, and constructive conflict, of course, in a professional way. How do you think that could be something that we can utilize together, and maybe conflict is an aggressive term, but just diversity of perspective, and how that diversity of perspective can lead to a more productive group and organization? Sure.
Yes, I think that's an excellent question, and I do think we tend to shy away from conflict. And I would also want to just kind of call out that in order to leverage our diversity, we actually need those differences of opinion. And while that might feel uncomfortable, we actually need to hear that different opinion. The one thing that I've found that really helps in some teams that I've been part of is the idea that we don't leave a decision or we don't leave the room until someone's actually voiced a differing opinion and has had a chance to be heard. And so we maybe call it the devil's advocate role, but we appreciate the devil in the room, because that's the whole idea, is to bring that different opinion and recognize that it's not about taking that personally because it's conflicting with our own views. So.
That's a great practice. Shanna, do you have any comments around that? No, I think you're good. She's good to go. Can you hear Shanna?
Can you hear me? Okay. I guess I'll offer one counterpoint to that, because I think while I recognize and appreciate the ideas around conflict generating better ideas and generating creativity, I think there's a component of how we do it that's really important. And if it's a really adversarial environment, I don't think that's easy for everybody to participate in. And to get the perspectives that you need from more than one person, we need some different styles to be able to manage that. So I think it is important, but I think there's also ways that we need to draw out more than that, than just through conflict.
I'll comment on that. I agree. Actually, I think, and I will admit I'm not great at this. I'm trying to get better. But I think the key in managing conflict is calm, actually. A mentor of mine once said to me, the calmest person in the room is the strongest person in the room. So, if you can diffuse emotion, that's really effective. And the other thing, a few interesting things. One is, as you become more senior, people get more aggressive because they're used to getting what they like or what they want. So that's kind of interesting. You have to hold your own, but you have to do it in a measured way. But the other thing is, as you get more senior and you get used to having your way, you have to remember to ask people for their views. Because one thing that I, haven't really appreciated is not everybody has the same personality as I do, right? Not everybody feels comfortable voicing their opinion. And there's a great book called Meltdown: Why Complex Systems Fail. And you would love it because it's, it's about complex systems and how to engineer, around failure. But actually the moral of that story is it's actually about sociology and how people behave and making sure we have enough diversity at the table so that people feel psychologically safe enough to raise small issues that seem innocuous but unusual. Because as our culture and technology becomes more and more advanced, it's harder and harder to spot small problems. So we have to rely on people's intuition. And actually, if everybody just thinks the same way, it's hard to spot errors and problems. So I think, and to do that, you really have to invite feedback, because often people don't feel comfortable. And you have to be thoughtful about how you respond to the feedback.
That's great, and I really thank you for those answers. I mean, I love your touching on that psychological safety in a group of high, in teams. But with that, I think you need leadership that who are empathetic and who create that space and environment for you. So there's a couple of things, there around the psychological safety, but also the diversity around that table. But so how do you get there? How do you get that diversity around the table and the perspective? Because often, as much as this group of women and many women that I know are incredibly ambitious, the decision leaders at the top are often roles come from referrals, from people they know, from within your inner circle. And usually that inner circle looks and talks and acts similar to that leader and maybe comes from that same place, even within their same community. So how do you break into that inner circle as an outsider to become, to get a seat at the table? Because I think that once you can do that, and I think it starts with intention from those leaders to recognize their unintended biases, but intentional in trying to create a diverse table. And so I think that's a very important fact too. And then once you do get there, feeling confident enough to say something, to speak up, and to so it really takes a particular leader in a group and a culture that allows and in fact really champions that kind of diversity in thought. So that's good. I don't know if anyone else has any comments around that.
I'll just share one other thing. For International Women's Day today, Pembina Pipelines had a lunchtime panel with 5 women on it. And quite honestly, I was blown away by the stories that I heard there. And I think you're right, there's a component of being able to open the door to different perspectives. And finding a way to do that doesn't mean just expecting that people will stand up and do it. It means that you create the opportunity for them to do it and that you create a safe space for them to do it. And I was so impressed that they all had the courage to talk about what they talked about because it was really meaningful, and that the company created that safe space, that they felt they could take it to the next level. So I think it's a bit of a combination of both.
I can add to that too. And I think, so I touched on this on my talk on the idea of humility. And I think it just starts with that recognition that someone else's perspective, even though it might be different, has value as well. And I think one way to kind of invoke that natural curiosity in another perspective and another experience is through storytelling. And storytelling has been around for ages, but it isn't as utilized in corporate environments, I feel. And I think we're starting to see that with these panel discussions. We've had a few at Suncor as well, where people do feel that safety in terms of being able to share their stories and the things that have worked for them. So.
Well, can you elaborate a little bit on that too, Gayathri? Because I know that you facilitated a storytelling session with Suncor Energy.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting because I had just completed my 15-year milestone at Suncor, and so it was kind of a cool way to celebrate that milestone, I feel. And so we invited people from across our business to share their stories of diversity and inclusion, and really share it from the perspective of what diversity and inclusion means for them through stories. So we really got to hear excellent stories from people on, whether it's the experiences they've faced or even how they've learned through others, through mentors and through the people they've led on why it's important to them. And so I've just seen the power of how stories can really bring people together. It can help people connect the dots and see that they're not alone in their experiences and that they can actually leverage things that they can learn from each other to move forward on their goals. So I do a lot of storytelling in the community as well.
I want to be a part of those. Great. Any other comments? Another thing that I think it was maybe Shanna who mentioned, I love the idea of even, breaking through barriers by mastering the power of the ask. Like sometimes we don't even ask for what it is that what we want, where we want to achieve, or ask how to get there. And a part of that too is also having really positive male mentors and leaders in our life who see and recognize the potential that came through in a lot of these presentations of what the potential these women have to achieve that, and believing in you, and even just that belief is so important. So it made me asking, what do I need to get to that next level, or having somebody have some faith in you to give you that opportunity. I mean, I think male champions are become major advocates and are very important advocates for women in the industry. And I think all of you seem, and I know I've had many in my career who really help elevate you. And so just even having that asking for it, and just asking for what you need to achieve, I think, is something that women tend to maybe shy away from a little bit more than men, where men have more of that confidence to just, put just to take on roles and ask for it. Is there any examples in your lives, or is there any comments that you'd like to talk about that, whether it's with male mentors or just asking for opportunities, and how that's resulted in your career?
Sure, I can offer my perspective. I would say I have lots of times in my career asked for raises or promotions. Not lots, but quite a few. As Wayne Gretzky says, you don't score in 100% of the shots you don't take, or something like that. So if you don't ask, you'll never get it. And, companies are, the companies we work for, they're public companies. And so, often you don't gratuitously give out promotions or raises. Or, you do par for the course. But, I think you have to advocate for yourself for sure. But it has to be confidence balanced with humility, as Gayathri pointed out. I think that's the magic of actually success in business, is the people that can balance confidence and humility. They are inspirational leaders, actually.
I think on the ask question, I know I've personally been in the situation of not asking for something when I should have. And then looking back and thinking, why didn't I even try? And I do think that does tend to happen to women more often than to men, and I'm not sure why, to be honest with you. But I guess maybe one of the things to think about with it is that, like Andrea says, there's a component of being okay with failure. You're going to ask and you're not always going to receive. But that's okay, and you need to be okay with, you know, stretching yourself a little bit to do that. And the second thing I think it's important for us to do is to test what's inside your head. So sometimes the message of, well, I'm not going to ask for that because I don't think I'm going to get it. Why would they give that to me? This isn't going to work. And we get a story inside our head that isn't the real story. And so sometimes just testing that out with a couple of people to see whether or not that's really the reality might give you also some courage to be able to take it beyond what you've been thinking.
I can add to that. I agree with everything both of you said. And I think what I would add to that too is a little bit of just focusing on the work that you can do and creating the impact that you can have in your current role. Because oftentimes I see when we're so focused on that next promotion or the next opportunity, we're actually kind of missing the point on how can we show up and serve the best way we can in our current roles. And that's not to say don't ask at all. I think absolutely women do need to ask, because research shows that women tend to ask less than men, but I think it's important to keep that perspective of still doing a good job in your current role. So
I would like to add something to that. I agree. People always show up in my office and they say to me, I'd like this role, I'd like this promotion, how can I get ahead? And in the words of Ashton Kutcher, opportunity looks a lot like hard work. Do a great job in the job you have, you'll impress people, they'll give you the next opportunity. I think it's the most powerful thing you can possibly do is perform well and build trust, you know, exceed people's expectations, deliver on your commitments and beyond. And, you know, it's just good business. I mean, and it's human nature to give people more responsibility the more they perform. I agree. It's the thing, and everybody controls how they show up. That's one thing you can control. So I think too many people focus on the next thing without focusing enough attention on what they're currently, you know, being asked to do.
Yeah, absolutely. No, those are great comments, and it's not to say that it doesn't come with hard work, because none of these these women on the stage, or any great leaders, male or female, got to where they were without the hard work, the sweat equity. You have to perform. You have to be great at what you do. You got to love what you do. What I find even more so is I think that women almost do it more for the passion, and because they just get so much fulfillment out of it. And Shanna, like, you're willing to work full-time job at half-time pay because you were just getting so much fulfillment out of that role. And I think that that's how a lot of women operate. And then we, you know, we'll work those long hours, put in those full all-nighters, and but we need to also remember to be our own advocates too, because no one's seeing those midnight hours or the fact that you're missing your kid's soccer game just so that you know, you could finish a report, and, you know, or when your family's at Callaway Park and you're like, what am I doing? I've had moments like that where you're trying to manage that work-life balance, and there is really no balance. Like, it is just all life, and you just you need a supportive network within your own family, within your own, you know, it takes a village to raise those your children and be supportive, you know, mother, wife, you know, leader, all those things and roles that we take on in our lives. So, yeah, no, thank you for that. I forgot what I was going to ask. I think I was going to switch gears a little bit and just say, like, during the pandemic, there's just been so many changes in our industry with M&A activity, restructuring. We've been hit hard on commodity prices and a negative perception in the industry. But at the same time, I think with change comes opportunity, and resilience is really key to that success as well. What do you think are some of the biggest opportunities, either for our industry, for women or people who've either, you know, have come onto hard times, and or, you know, how can we take this time in this transition of the energy industry into a new space?
Can start. I do see that there's the industry in general is being called to move into a future that's cleaner, lower carbon, right? We're being asked to diversify our sources of value creation to protect against those commodity cycle fluctuations. And I think those are huge challenges, and the way we're going to get through that is by innovation and trying to figure out new ways of approaching those problems. And I think this actually does present a great opportunity, not only for women, because women, I believe, just naturally bring those strengths of being the change makers out there, but also for young people who are just graduating and who are entering the workforce now with those fresh ideas and new perspectives that now have an environment that's conducive towards change. And so I think this is a real opportunity for young people to thrive as well and bring those ideas that we all need to move forward together.
And how do we draw in those millennials who, with just the way, the perspective of the industry, I mean, and we know as we're in it how really, truly innovative and how much it's changing, and we're moving towards renewable energy. But, we want young people to want to work in this industry and to feel like it's innovative and we're progressive, and it's not, an industry of the past, but it still has much more future ahead of it. And so how do we draw in that talent as well and make this an exciting place for millennials to work in?
Okay, I have a response. I honestly think I may have the world's best job at the world's most interesting time in the energy kind of evolution of energy systems. It's a huge opportunity. The energy transition is a huge opportunity. We have a crisis, a climate crisis, but crisis breeds innovation. And I don't think there's a shortage of people with great ideas. Like, honestly, people email me or they're at my door all day long saying, hey, we should do this, we should do that. We almost have a bit of an embarrassment of riches in Calgary because we have a young, super well-educated population with tons of technical knowledge that can be transferred into cleaner energy. I feel really confident that Calgary, Canada, will be leaders in the success of the energy transition. And there's actually a great book called The Geography of Genius that's kind of a travel log, part history, part travel log, about why innovation happens in cultures. And the summary, like just to summarize the whole book, sorry for spoiling the ending, but it's really about challenge and strife forcing innovation. And I think that's where we are. And it's where we are in the energy transition, but it's also where we are in a global health pandemic. So, human beings are super innovative. We're very creative. And the more we have to be creative, the more we are creative. And diversity is very important to innovation and creativity as well. So let me leave it there. And Shanna, you can offer your perspectives too.
I'm not quite sure if I'm going to answer this question the way you asked, perhaps, but I guess I think about it a little bit about the same way as we've approached safety in the industry over the last number of years, where when I first started working, we didn't talk much about safety, hardly at all, I would say. And now it is something that we believe we can do our jobs without anybody getting hurt. And I think for me, that's a little bit of what this shift is for organizations and for people. It's to believe that we can do it and expect that we can do it. Because when we do that, you make it happen in the same way that we can do all our work safely and not have people get hurt. So there's a mentality shift to that I think is really important for us.
Great, thank you. I've got a couple of comments here. My Slido was backed up. Now it's on. So one of the comments from Anonymous, not a question, but I just have to say that you are all rock stars and your companies are so lucky to have you on their payroll. Thank you for being authentic. What are some tips that you can provide to other women on how you balanced work and life throughout your career? So I think maybe that was based on the time to Andrea.
I sometimes am not very successful in this regard. And right now, I would like to beg for my husband's forgiveness for all my late nights, including last night and my early morning this morning. You know, I think you need to have a spouse that's supportive. Because there's a lot of sacrifices. Honestly, they're a partner in your career. And sometimes I'm not great at work, and sometimes I'm not great at home. And I will acknowledge that. But, you know, and the other thing, there's a movie, it's like Sarah Jessica Parker, called something like, I don't know how she does it. Well, one night I was doing my ironing, watching that movie, and I actually had to shut it off because I had a physical reaction to this movie. Because, you know, it basically, she wakes up in the middle of the night and realizes, oh dear, I have to bake cupcakes for, you know, my kid for school, and she's baking in the middle of the night. I have actually had that exact same thing happen to me in real life. I don't actually, my world is a bit of a disaster, but my children are healthy and largely happy. They do well in school. They have good friends. I have, you know, a loving husband, and I have great friends, and I enjoy life. So I kind of feel like the craziness maybe is worth it. I don't know. Maybe I'm just kidding myself that I can do it all successfully. But I have had to say no to a lot of things. Like, that was one realization, is you can't do everything. So you kind of have to pick your battles. And then just admit that you're not perfect, I would say, but your support network is very important, I would say.
Great. Another question that has got 25 likes. As female leaders, what has been the most significant barrier in your career? Tough question. But people want to know. And I think that's a hard question. You know, it is a tough question because there's so many, I think, different little things. And sometimes it's more the little things that just add up that can feel overwhelming more than one particular thing that can be so challenging in a career. And I feel you, Andrea, too, and what you're saying. And I think all of us have probably gone through that as family, you know, mothers. I have 3 young children, ages 11, 9, and 7, and trying to be that all things to all people. And sometimes I'm, you know, I could be, you know, a rock star at work, but I, you know, didn't get home to make dinner, and I missed a recital or something, or, you know, and you're not always. I try to be as present in each parts of my life as much as possible, but it's challenging. It's hard, and I do have an incredibly supportive spouse that carries that load for me and for us as a family many times. But so it does take a village to raise a child. So so what would be some of those barriers, or what would you think would be a comment on either just the barriers or how have you sort of overcome things that seemed like barriers in your career?
I can start. It's really hard to pick one.
Yeah.
It's like, which one?
Yeah.
I think for me, so I have a personal mantra, I say purpose over perception. And the reason for that is this idea of really playing to my strengths. Because I think the barriers, to your point around those small things that accumulate, I find the barrier for me is it becomes really easy to internalize bias. And it becomes, especially when you're the only one, if you're the only woman or you're the only person of color in situations, it's really easy to just start to internalize bias. And then that becomes connected to this need for accomplishment and this need for external validation. And then all of a sudden you've kind of lost control of your own purpose as to why you're there in the first place. And so I do a lot of internal reflection through writing and storytelling, and I've come to realize that for myself, I'm all about defining my own purpose and striving towards that, because if I've just started to play to people's perceptions, then I'm never getting out of bed. Like, you can't please everybody, right? And you try to please everybody, you please nobody. So it's really that idea of focusing on what brings me joy and playing towards my strengths and purpose. So.
Great answer, yeah.
I think I talked about this pretty much already, but I'm not sure that it's, I don't think it's been a barrier for me, but I think it could have been perhaps that. Although I question whether or not there's any barriers and only different paths that we take. Because I think different paths can take you to the same place or they can take you to different places. But I do think for women, and I mentioned it already, but particularly right now, it's really challenging to balance work and family and kids. And when I look at engineering numbers in the 25 years since I graduated, they haven't changed much at senior levels. Not nearly as much as I would have hoped them to change. So women start out in their career, but they exit. And I think, there's a natural part of that in terms of our society and looking after kids. So again, if it's something that we want to change, having some of that flexibility, I think is really important. And maybe recognizing that it's not a barrier, it's just a different path, and that you don't have to go straight up, you don't have to have a linear career path. You can have different things happen and you can explore different things as you go.
My comments would be, I'm almost embarrassed. I don't want to say how easy I've had it, but, I would say for me, being a woman has almost been an advantage. If I'm prepared, if I work hard, if I'm thoughtful, people remember me because I'm often the only woman in the room. The only woman in the room. So I'm memorable, right? Probably my biggest problem is, my weaknesses are my strengths overplayed, right? I drive for results. I'm tenacious. And so I have to be really cognizant of not leaving bodies in my wake. But, and why do I say I'm so lucky? Because I think back to when I was in law school. I never did criminal law, but I remember one of my colleagues, I was in third year university, and my colleague came to me and said, Andrea, I have a client, I do this student legal assistance, free legal advice, and I have a client who's a young Indigenous woman. And she's been convicted, or she's been charged with theft, and she won't talk to me. Would you mind talking to her and helping me with this file? So I went and talked to this lady, and I remember she was 21 and I was 21, and she had a very hard life. 2 children. She was in a cycle of poverty and didn't have familial support, economic support. She didn't have the education to be able to lift herself out of poverty. She was stuck in a situation of prostitution. And I thought to myself, and this was a smart young woman. There was no difference between that woman and me. The only difference was opportunity. I had it, she didn't. So, I'm very fortunate and almost embarrassed at my fortune. I think my obligation is to make sure that, we lift other people up. We give them a hand up, not a hand out. I'm super pleased to have you support, women and Indigenous women, because not everybody has the same opportunities as we have, and the problems that we have are almost trivial, right? I don't want to downplay some of that stuff, but there are people who face really serious obstacles, and I think we have an obligation to try to remove those barriers.
That's really well said. Thank you, Andrea. And I think, we even had a little bit of that conversation amongst the group of us before we got together here today, was really recognizing that we're fortunate. We're coming from a place of privilege, from a place of access to potentially more things than others. And so I think it's just important to always recognize that and know your place and how you can help others who are maybe not in that same place. I think it's very important to do that. Just another comment around barriers too. I think Gayathri commented on this in her speech, but I think when you come across barriers, and we all go through challenging times in our lives, but it's how you react to those challenges or barriers are those defining moments in your life. Because you could have somebody who doesn't, support you and says you're not going to make it. So how you react to those kind of comments in your career, in your life, or in, any point in your life, those can become your defining moments, and you can choose the path that you want to take. And I think it's just the ability and the way that you respond to those types of challenges in your life that really become and define who you are as a person and can be career developing for you. We're running out of time, but so I think I'm going to just wrap it up here. I wish we had like a clap, like track. Can we hit a clap track on the audio? I'd like. Thank you. It feels so different without a live audience. So I would I'd like to just thank everybody here today for all of you attending out in this virtual world. Thank you for taking the time. This will also be recorded and on YouTube for the recording for people to watch in the future. Thank you to our speakers. Thank you for each one of you for taking the time out of your incredibly busy schedules to participate, and just the thought, I just was so excited about, I could tell when we had conversations of what the theme really meant to you. It was resonating, and just the ideas that were already percolating. I knew this was going to be a great talk, so thank you so much for putting in all that energy and genuine interest into this. As a token of our appreciation, we've put together gift baskets for you. They are buy local gift baskets, so they're all from local vendors within our community. We'd like to support those, so those are, we'll be giving you those as well. We've made a donation on your behalf to Canada Bridges, nonprofit organization.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I've lost the clicker, and I don't know if those are still going. But again, thank you to all our sponsors for your generous support, to our gold sponsors, Suncor Energy, PTW Energy Services, Colliers International, silver sponsors, Spartan Controls, ICM Asset Management, Drifter and Mergen Law, and our bronze sponsors, AES Advanced Electrical Services, Calgary Women in Energy, Gas Processing Association of Canada, or GPAC, Maxfield, RailServe, Hive Innovations, Gemini Fabrication, and Starbelly Open Kitchen and Bar. And that includes our event. Thank you to everyone, and please have fun and stay safe.